Hi, and welcome back to the Mob Mentality Show. I'm Chris Lucian, and co-host is Austin Chadwick. And today we once again have Ben Kovitz. If you remember a few episodes before, Ben kind of talked to us before he was setting up his class to do mobbing, and then we had a episode kind of in the middle of the whole thing. Now that the semester's over, it's kind of time for a retrospective. So. Ben, I think we know you well from the other episodes so far. You can maybe do a brief intro and then maybe we can jump into how it went and we can talk a little bit about what's coming next.
Oh, so I was a software developer for about, I don't know, 15 years or so, in all sorts of fields. And then I went off and got a PhD, and I've been teaching at a university for a couple of years now. And this semester had to teach software design. Um, had no idea how to do that because how do you learn software design? Not from a class, not from a college class at least, as far as I know. I think mostly from experience. And so I went with the mob programming as a way to get the students lots of real life experience in the class.
Awesome, awesome, fantastic. So yeah, as Chris was saying, before we were, in flight, and now that the class is over, maybe one of the first things we can talk about in retrospective is what went well. So what was some of the feedback from the students on things that went well, and then naturally we'll go into maybe somewhat of a dark mode later, and that could lead to some
Okay.
brainstorming. But first, let's start with happy.
Okay.
Yeah, what went well? What did the students like? Yeah.
Okay, so there were only 7 students in the class, which was a great blessing. The software engineering program at Cal Poly Humboldt is pretty new, so the class sizes are particularly small right now. Um, so get in while you still can, kids. But um, so the students really liked the mobbing, and this is kind of unexpected. I would view the mobbing as primarily a means to an end to, we're going to get you. You're going to get coding experience. You're going to have your code modified, minutes after you write it. You're going to see this rapid evolution. But what the students kept telling me throughout the course was that they really liked the experience of collaboration that they had not had in other contexts. We try to get students to pair program a lot. I try to get them to pair program in labs and other classes that I run. And I'm not over there like getting them to pair right. I'm just sort of, saying and often two people at one terminal is good enough. But stuff goes wrong in pairing with students. A lot of times, one student will do all the work. um, and I'd always say, hey, why don't you switch? Who's at the keyboard now, right? And sometimes they didn't want to, right? So the mobbing we do since we did it by rotation. The every with the timer that got everyone involved, and they said that just like they had not previously had that experience of collaboration, like making your code better and learning all of these subtle little skills of collaboration, of how to well d- how to respectfully, be respectful while you're changing what someone else did. No one ever used the term egoless, but I think this is one thing they really learned from the mob programming because you go in and you're just like, well, I'm making a little change now. We'll see how it goes, and always with the expectation that it's going to change very soon because you've now had that happen 100 times, so that's normal. Anyway, the best thing was the mobbing collaboration itself. Um, and we did get to do a lot of I would say a lot of design where you don't think it through in a whole lot in advance. I always would have the students, bite off a tiny, tiny piece of the problem, get that to work, um, and don't worry if the code is that good. Just write it in the most simple, straightforward way you can, and they would see, after a few times, a few rotations, they would um, they would see how code almost writes itself if you just let it.
Nice, nice. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I guess before going to maybe the challenges, coming from the hi history of mobbing, where turn up the good was a big thing, or as Chris likes to call it, bright spots. Um, Reflecting on those wins and those things that went well in the classroom, um, I don't know. Do you think of it, if there any way to turn up the good on those kinds of things, or are they already turned up to 11 for
Uh,
maybe a potential hypothetical future class? Yeah.
um, excuse me. Yeah, I think there's some stuff to be turned up. Um, let's see. So I would say the thing that went best in the whole class was our very first attempt at mobbing, where the students previously in the previous class session had been given the problem of us basically designing a garage door opener, um, but without writing the code for it. And so they had to make a state transition diagram for that. And that was this idea of you don't think about writing any code. So in a previous class session, no code was written. You just draw a diagram of what are all the states and what are all the state transitions. And so that was an eye-opening experience for them right there. How simple that you can think through a design kind of mathematically without worrying about like anything about the programming language. So then, when we mobbed to do the to implement it, um, the students did had not. They basically took everything they had done on the state transition diagram and neglected it, and went and just started writing, for loops with ifs inside them, and or, just like the if you've ever seen this type of program turn into this kind of highly bug-prone, complicated loop. That's what the students started doing. And then, so at some point, I said, "Hey, how about we make a switch statement using they actually did have the state variable. A student had put a state variable in a couple of rotations previously. So how about we do a switch statement on the state variable, and we do a case for every one of those, every state." And the eyes opened, right? And it was like, and I didn't really have to do too much after that. After I was the navigator, we got like one or two cases done. The students were able to finish it and clean up all the rest of the code. And it not only compiled the first time, not so unusual for if you do it in VS Code, but it also worked correctly the first time. And if you didn't know this kind of technique, it would be extremely bug prone. So sorry, I'm long-windedly telling you how this first thing went. But what made this thing go so well was that it was a very tight, small thing, right? It was like something we could do in one day. And um, and it was like we had a definite concept that the students were learning. Um, anyway, we're still on the things that went super well. But I would say if I were to do it again, I would do more like that, more things where we have here's the technique of the day or the technique of the 2 days, whatever, and we'll mob to just get that one thing done.
Yeah, so this kind of I guess getting a concept and then this concept of like shuhari, like the I do, we do, you do sort of thing. That sounds like that going through that transition. Um, so that's one benefit. As the semester went on, did you see other bright spots, or was there, was the quality of the mobbing increasing or decreasing over time? Like what happened during the whole like end-to-end experience?
Oh, interesting. I never thought about the quality of the mobbing. How did it change? I would say it started off remarkably good and stayed that way, right? Um, we did have we talked about this in the previous episode, so I'll just be really brief. But we did have sometimes a student wouldn't really know what to do as the navigator, didn't have any ideas, and some of the students who are neither navigator nor driver would basically call out ideas, and so you'd have a certain amount of like n not such intense participation. But we fixed that, after we brought it up when basically it was all happy after that. Anyway, good. It was all good mobbing.
Nice, nice. That's quite a good story, and I think I've seen that before with mobs where it might start out rocky, the kind of forming what's the cycle again, Chris? It's the norming. No, no, no. Storming. Go ahead. Yeah, tell
Oh,
me.
yeah, storming, forming, norming, and performing
Storming.
is what people tend to
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
do.
Where you go through those phases and then you kind of plateau, but almost in a good way, where it's like,
Yeah.
I don't, sometimes it's kind of like we're retrospecting on our collaboration. We're like, I don't know if, it's not like we've attained perfection, but it's like, yeah, it's good enough. There's other things to improve on other than our collaboration at this point.
There's also the concept of the
Yeah,
satir change model from
yeah,
Virginia Satir that is a similar curve, but tends to deal, the original context is like families and like adding a member or removing a member and things shifting, but but in a software team, like adding and removing members and things like that. Um,
yeah.
yeah, and getting used to each other and working through those things. So yeah, the interpersonal aspects, sometimes it can go really well, and then you just have like that. There was a video game I used to play, Overwatch, which there were teams that the random matchmaking, there were teams that would get together, and there was a YouTuber that referred to it as chance serendipity. And so that idea of chance serendipity, I think about a lot actually in business. It's those random encounters, and that's why like people like water cooler conversations and things like that. So you might have chance serendipity that it sounds like worked in your favor in this particular class, and everybody kind of gelled well and things like that. Were there any challenges during that time of like interpersonally and just getting along together, or was it just like a very easygoing group that kind of worked through everything?
Um, yeah, I was rather worried about this before the semester began. Like, how are people going to gel? But it seemed to just go smoothly. I think I really lucked out with having students who were all dedicated and very cooperative. You know, not everyone is, but we didn't have any prima donnas.
Nice. That's great. That's great. Well, kind of pivoting to a maybe more technical potential challenge was kind of outside the show. I know you mentioned that working on C++ Qt GUI was difficult for TDD. So I guess maybe describe that experience a little bit, and then do you have any thoughts on maybe what you would do differently given those challenges you experienced this past semester?
Oh yeah, so QT, I originally had not. We had a class session where one of the tasks we were going to do was choose which GUI library we were going to use. And I had chosen FLTK and I think SDL, because they're pretty low level. And I figured the idea is the whole point is this class is going to really learn design patterns. We're going to learn how all this stuff goes together. One of the students, though, had found Qt on his own. And so we added that to the list. And of course, Qt has about a billion features and it's very mature. You can really whip stuff out in it. And by the end of the class, I agreed, and the general consensus was let's go with Qt. Even though, and I was saying one disadvantage here is it's going to be tough to learn it, right? Because there's a lot to know. Um, and another disadvantage also is that it does a lot of things for you, right? Like, you know, you can just like I didn't even realize till we started actually using it. You can just go like set a little flag. Oh, now you can drag and move this thing. And it's just like one line of code, set this flag to be this value, and you have all this stuff just works. Like, um, and I do think Qt does teach by its own example a lot of good design ideas or a lot of kind of really amazing design ideas. But it created a bunch of problems. One problem, strangely enough, was installing it. We had some students have Windows laptops, some have Mac, some have Linux. And so just, we ended up, I tried to do as much of that one-on-one with students outside of class time, but we blew a fair amount of class time just trying to get Qt and CMake and, 'cause VS Code to, work with all these things correctly. Uh, There was a certain amount of mess with Qt. Um, but I will say though, and one th nice thing is though, we were able to have a really fast feedback cycle where you have an idea for some GUI thing and you whip it out right with the Qt approach and you can just see it right away and you can see problems right away. I wanted the students to see problems a lot and get used to correcting them. We
Nice.
also we did oh, by the way, another element of the class, which I think went really well, was we had student presentations at the beginning of almost every class on a reading assigned at the previous class. So some of those were like read some sections from Martin Feller's refactoring book, read some sections from Scott Meyer's, a certain section from Scott Meyer's effective C++ books, the Gang of Four book, things like that. But we also did a few where it was read some of the Qt, read a section of the Qt documentation and explain that to everybody else. So we it did work. I think it worked okay with that. If I was going to do it again, I don't know that I would necessarily say don't use Qt, but I think I would know Qt before doing the class, and um, and be it would be a little less exploratory. And then again, when I look back on this, I think so even though it was kind of clumsy, like we were sort of stumbling around a bit as we were learning Qt and pulling in the next Qt feature to do something, the stumbliness is real life, right? I think students get a very wrong impression from a lot of college classes that if you know what you're doing, right, then everything go you know exactly what to do and everything goes without a hitch. And that's not real software development, right? In real software development, you're constantly learning, you're constantly finding out better ways of doing things than you would even known existed, 2 days before, So um, I think I don't know. I'm actually of pretty mixed feelings about that.
Nice. 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 Yeah, and just kind of brainstorming along with you when I've done katas or similar learning type experiences is kind of going back to you. How did you mention it? You mentioned it was like the technique or learning of the day. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, if you're kind of going with that piece by piece kind of thing, um, yeah, I mean, you if you are dealing with a GUI framework that is hard to DTDD, that could be the technique learning of the day is to be like, okay, how to, use some testing patterns. I don't know, humble object or, peel and slice or some other techniques to learn how to make the hard to test thing testable. Or you could pick a different GUI that a lot of modern GUI frameworks have testability built in for fast tests.
Oh,
Or, like I think we mentioned in other conversations, you could use something that's like pure domain or pure backend, where those difficulties can sometimes melt away, but show up in other ways. But yeah, I think you're right. It just depends what technique of the day you're trying to learn, right? So I think what happened in your class, it sounded like the technique of the day you learned was how to learn something complicated as a group,
oh
right?
yeah. And,
Yeah,
and we had a certain amount of
yeah,
mob documentation reading, right? And it's
yeah,
like we
yeah.
need to go and figure that. But also, that was a good opportunity also for people to learn to contribute as mobbers as opposed to navigators and drivers.
Right.
One person would get out the documentation on the matter of interest or start digging around how do you do this and for how do you do this in Qt, and they were then able to help out. So it was a little stumbly at those times, but worked fine. By the way, it also led us to more like serendipitous stuff about. So a student mentioned one day that he had no idea how you implement undo, okay, right? And if you think about undo, it's a weird concept. How do you run your program backward, right? Um, so I had them for the next class session or next two class sessions, we actually that turned into a very focused, um, almost as focused as the state transition stuff. Um, we had the students read up on the memento pattern and the
Ooh.
command pattern.
Nice.
And then we talked about it as a group for a while. So okay, which one after the presentation? We said which one do we want to do our undo in? And we all thought that memento would be simpler because memento it's like you take a snapshot of the current state. By the way, the software we're writing was a simple diagram editor for making. We had it was a diagram editor to make graphs, nodes and edge graphs that I could use to make homework assignments in my other classes. So, um, so we implemented the memento thinking, oh, you just take a snapshot of the current state of the graph, store it in some little vector, and you just go back to the one you want. And what we found was that was a disaster. Right? You wouldn't think, how can that be a disaster? It's because C++ and memory management. That's why. Um, the Qt has ownership over all of the little things in the diagram. And if you have multiple instances of that diagram, you have all these pointers going to things that Qt thinks it owns and is going to delete if you delete something. So I thought this was great because it was like next class session. Okay, we've now learned Memento is a complete disaster with Qt. Let's try command pattern. Beautiful, not just instantly everything works and nothing to it, right? So I thought it was good that the students got to go know both design patterns, but also they got to experience that process
Right.
of
Nice.
learning the surprises. And I think their previous courses didn't really give them all that solid an understanding of memory ownership in C++.
I absolutely love that story because, hmm, yeah, we'll probably get to it later, but there's a lot of things that maybe a test or that can't be assessed very easily in a quantitative way. But one thing I'm guessing they're picking up from that is something that I think our industry is struggling hardcore to learn, which is this kind of from a distance ivory tower architecture thinking,
Yeah.
where without running any experiments, I can armchair a huge set of architecture decisions and then hand them to a team to go implement, right? And I think that experience you just shared shows that something may work great conceptually, but in practice, combining all the complexity of the library you're using, the language you're using, the domain you're working in, plus the device or whatever you're working with, all that combined might make a pattern that looks beautiful conceptually make absolutely no sense when you try it. Yeah.
Yep. It's hard to convince someone who hasn't been on the other end of it. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like when I look in my imagination, everything I see is beautiful. So aren't we good? Right? Um,
I I have a bit of a suggestion, just kind of around your original thought about what you would do in the future. There's certainly opportunities like that where C++ gives you this you have memory management there. You're not doing garbage collection automatically, right? Um, and so that's one learning, right? And whether or not you'd use a certain UI framework or not. And so I uh, Willem Larson always kind of likes to talk about the fluent edge and being on the fluent edge. And so you don't want to be in a state of overwhelm, but you also don't want to be in a state of boredom. You want to have what you're doing be just outside your comfort zone so that you have something to learn and stretch for, and that can increase motivation, increase the speed. And so um, I think if you were trying to simplify the problem down, you might use something like Python or something instead of C++ to abstract away the memory management stuff. You might use something like Streamlit to make it so that it's just one line to make a button that would have an if, versus creating a series of services and other things in service of the UI to allow interaction. Or you might go the other direction and you might but I think the question is what are you targeting the learning of? And is mobbing the point of the class, or is something else the point of the class? And mobbing is helping you get there. and then you might set up the environment in such a way that you have as few distractions as possible, right? So if learning those frameworks were a distraction, then I think you might go with the simplest possible framework. So in that case, I would recommend something like Python and Streamlit, because you can make a complex user interface with a front end and a server back end, and all of it works after just like a single line of code. Where you might, what you'd more realistically find in an environment today is teams using React and Angular as a front end, and then either a server-based or serverless back end, and then a database associated with it. And those are two very different paradigms, but a lot of data scientists are using Streamlit right now because it creates a lot of UI for essentially very little investment, and the APIs are extremely simple. That's very different than like trying to do memory management in C++ with a hard to follow documentation for UI framework that has a lot of kind of gotchas or something. So, I think a lot about that just off the top of my head.
Oh, thanks. I find that very interesting. Very interesting. I have not used Streamlit myself. I will have to check it out. Um, I did. Our school uses C++ as its main teaching language, and
Yeah.
when I first heard of that, I thought it was kind of crazy. But I've now kind of come to appreciate that it's actually great because the C++ is the I think the one language, maybe Rust, but one of the few languages that kind of shows you are exposed to everything down to the metal up to the loftiest sorts of abstractions. But it's not easy. Not, um, um,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I can relate to that. We used C++ for almost all my classes except one or two in my university experience, and so I think Chris had the similar experience.
Yeah.
And yeah, there are definite pros to that. Um, yeah, I think if you can get through it, you'll be exposed to yeah, a lot more of the guts of the system, right? As opposed to here's a car, drive it. It's kind of more like, well, first we're going to look at how the engine works, and then after you understand the engine, then you'll get to drive the thing, you know?
oh,
It's kind
yeah.
of yeah, and so yeah, that definitely has some pros as well. And I guess it
Scope of
comes back
learning.
to what Chris says. What's the fluent end you're trying to teach for this class? And maybe if this is their sixth C++ course, maybe the memory management they're used to, and it's not frustrating them or whatever. And so, yeah. Cool, cool, cool. To pivot a bit, kind of thinking about how your class went, was inspiring. From what you said, it sounded like you had a mix of solo work, mobbing, reading on your own, presenting to the class, maybe these collaborative design sessions. And it's kind of synergy I've heard from a few different worlds now. I heard it from an education person, an interview I did with them recently for like kind of a classical education thing where he's talking about having a mix of all these things. And then I've also read in a business book recently talking about the same kind of thing where having a mix of solo and group work is has a lot of statistical correlation with high performing companies. And so maybe this is again turn up the good kind of thing. Seeing that went well for you, is there a way to be more intentional about this, or is it kind of already in place in your current class design? And then a corollary question I would say is, should this be a pattern for industry team design as well, not just classes? Yeah,
Oh yeah. So the solo work thing just kind of evolved on its own. I had
sure.
planned out kind of the overall structure of, class kind of early in the semester we do this, then we do that, then end of the semester we do that. But actually a lot of the stuff just kind of evolved in the class as the obvious solution to a problem that we were having. Like figuring out how to do this one thing is more than we can do as a group in an hour and a half. So who'd like to go and uh, like some of the presentations were um, somebody volunteered to do a rough cut on a design. So they go do that before the next class, and they present it at the beginning of the class. And then we say, okay, we kind of like this, we like that. Let's try doing this. Sometimes the student would write some code, a bunch of code solo, and we would re-implement it. I think that worked really well. Um, Now about for industry, doing this in industry, I'm thinking um, that the ideal life, at least for someone like me, would be to work collaboratively most of the day and have some solo stuff to do, and do it just like this class. Also, you have readings and presentations a little bit. And I've seen things like this at other companies where I've worked. The pre readings and presentations were usually done in lunch hour, right? So they weren't officially company time. But you know what I mean? We all kind of at one company where I worked, one fellow taught group theory at lunch hour because we had an abstract algebra system. Also with the solo stuff, as great as mobbing is, there's something I call it taking dictation from the muse. This is I have to be alone, quiet, completely immersed in the subject, and able to sit there with a totally blank mind, completely stuck, not knowing what to do, and then some thought, almost in the form of a sentence, will come to mind, and I'll just write it down and go, "Okay, thank you, Muse. Let's try that." Um, and in a mobbing situation, it's like, it's pretty, at least the way we did it, it's pretty chaotic, right? Things move really fast, but you're not going to have that kind of an experience. Um, so I like this for industry, and I find myself thinking, I'm kind of curious if your experience agrees with this, if this just tends to naturally evolve also.
Yeah, I mean, I think reflecting on kind of organically what's grown into how we work. It does tend to be quite a mix from what you said. So we have dedicated learning time. So we through multiple experiments, plus some I think strategic things put in place at the beginning of kind of the mob journey for where we work. Dedicated learning time was part of it. With part of it was group, part of it was solo. But kind of seeing how it's grown over, I don't know, 10, 15 years, I think it does tend to naturally have this mix that you're talking about. So from having dedicated time for learning, dedicated time for working as a group. Um, and then I think what I've seen in healthy mobs is people will make adjustments as needed, right? So um, if they are inspired by something happening that from on the mob that the mob is doing on the production code, they'll take that into their dedicated solo learning time and then come up with some stuff and then bring it to the mob next day and say like, it's okay if we throw away this code, but here's some experiments I ran and I'd like your thoughts on it. So I've seen them morph and use the learning time for that. I've also seen people split away and just be like, I love what's going on here, but I'm gonna go split away for, I don't know, an hour, a day or something and try some stuff and then bring it back. And it reminds me similar to what you were talking about where people go off, read a book or write some code, and then the next day at class they come and present it. I see that happen quite often naturally in mobs where people will be like, hey, since last time we mobbed, here's something I learned or I read or I experimented with on the code. What do you all think of it? And so it's kind of like a little mini lightning talk almost. I've also seen it show up in our environment. We do have monthly lightning talks where people can share with the whole group, not just like a small group.
Huh.
Um,
Wow.
so it's actually quite interesting to see each of these things kind of, you're independently experimenting and you've kind of landed with this mix, and we're independently experimenting and have landed with a similar mix in industry. And so, yeah.
Actually, I've heard a little bit about an anthropologist named Jean Lave.
Mhm.
I really don't know much about her, but I took a course on applying cog-sci research to education when I was in grad school, and she came up a little bit, particularly when I was bringing up and the value of apprenticeship as a way of teaching. And I'm thinking that well, what Jean Lave says is that um, the way people normally learn is in a social context. You begin kind of working on jobs at the periphery, right? This is what um, you're not given like crucial responsibilities at the beginning, but you're working with other people and you're doing something real and you're working with you have more experienced people, and you have people at your level, you're working with all of them, and you just bit by bit, tiny bit by tiny bit each day, you get more experience, you pick up more things. This uh, um as I understand it, this is the human way to learn, right? This has been working since as long as there have been human beings. Um, and the spend lots of time lecturing and then doing exams is a kind of a weird thing. I think it started in the Middle Ages, but I'm not entirely sure. Um, so yeah, like I'd say the main yeah we haven't really gone to the oh well here's the main drawback of the class as I see it. Um, we only had about 30 hours of total mobbing on the main project. We did some other mobbing on other things, on other small things too, but and the reason for that is the class meets twice a week. It's 2 hours of class. We do little presentations and we have other stuff at the beginning. So you basically are going to get an hour and a half per class session, 3 hours a week, so about 30 hours. 30 hours over, 2.5 months is like a little less than 1 week at a regular job, right? And of course, we're not just writing software, we're learning all kinds of basics that you can expect pros to be familiar with. But the reason you have the course is because these are students. Um, so the lack of mobbing time, I would say, is the worst thing. Um, uh, and there was something I was really hoping the students would learn from this class that I don't think we didn't get it very strongly, and that's Rebecca Werfsbach's view of design. That design is what goes beyond correctness and makes the habitability of the code. Like, do you like living with and working with this code, and is it easy to keep modifying? Because real world software development is modifying. Students, when they come out of college, tend to have no clue about that. They're used to you write a homework assignment, it's you know unreadable code, it's crazy stuff. Um, you should see some of the stuff I see, and but it passes, it gets them the grade for that assignment, never look at it again. Um, Whereas real software development, you are basically you have to cultivate, I don't know, you have to cultivate the soil in which you grow your software. And I was hoping we would have some experience of that, but in 30 hours and putting a few features together and changing a few things, not enough.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, I mean, first thought that comes to me, Chris, is if you're gonna go, I'm curious to your thoughts too, Chris F. But my first thought is there are katas designed to kind of simulate this experience. And the people in the kata know that you're being simulated, so it's not quite the same as um, I think so I think before I give the name of the kata, I think that what you're trying to target to teach, and to put in other words, is I think you were saying it the other day, Chris, it's about the 3 to 5 year mark. I experienced this personally at companies where if you don't make the code a bit habitable, did I say that pronounce that correctly? Nice to live with. In about 3 to 5 years, it becomes absolutely awful. Bugs go through the roof. No one understands the code. You fix one bug and you add five more. The more people you have working on it, it's just, I've been on teams where you're swimming in hundreds of bugs at about the 3 to 5 year mark. Where the first couple of years, you're like, man, we're a good team. We got everything that's going great. Um, and so you're trying to simulate that, and you can't have a 3 to 5 year long class, right? In my experience, the warning signs and pains start much earlier than that. But most people don't even care. Like they're just like, oh, it's fine. Oh, it's fine. Oh, it's fine. Until I think it's about the 3 to 5 year mark where it becomes so terrible that everyone acknowledges the problem. But before then, it's only the people who've been there before who are like scared about the warning signs. And
Well,
so one kata that comes to mind is like the Gilded Rose, where I don't know if this was original intention of the kata, but my experience when I did the kata, and it's like an exercise, is the code seems quite wild, and it's got a decent subset of features, and you're trying to maintain that set of features and add more. Um, and so, yeah, so maybe a daily technique could be something like that. I don't know, Chris, didn't you have ideas before where kids would pass or students would
Yeah,
pass
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
code base on through
So
time or something like
I have a lot
that?
of thoughts on this. I think we might have talked about it in another academic episode, actually.
Yes.
But what you're describing, I think I've begun to call like the ship of Theseus principle of software, where if you consider a software team to be the ship for this analogy, and you consider the software developers to be the planks of wood, so to speak, as you repair the ship either in the museum or while it's sailing, you replace planks of wood over time, and then the question in philosophy is like, is it the same ship or not? And so when I'm talking about a software project, a lot of the time it's you know, in academia, the project is thrown away typically. Students do a semester long project and then it gets thrown away. But what happens in reality and for almost all of my career is you join a company. The code has been worked on for decades before you were there. You're going to spend some years working on that code base, and then the changes that you make will live decades after you leave. And so in that way, the code base ends up being the metaphysical concept of the ship, right? You are the same team, even though the person A and person B may have never worked together before. And so, there's another concept that I like from Jeremy Clark, who kind of says like, imagine that the next person to work on your code is a homicidal maniac, right? So he opens up the code, sees how horrible it is, and comes after you. So those might be like some extreme analogies, but the gilded rose kata is definitely a way to simulate that. Also, the tennis refactoring kata, because and I think both katas are translated into basically every programming language out there, and they just teach the skills of working and refactoring to patterns. Lots of YouTube videos of people working through these problems and making choices around refactoring. Another thought that I had is basically like, having a ongoing project from semester to semester that keeps moving forward. And as things become less, habitable in that project, then it becomes more about cleaning and stewardship across the semesters. But in all of those situations, I think students are woefully prepared to work on code bases that are over 10 years old. And so often they're just assigned a bug when they first join the company to fix in this like, really old code base, and they end up swimming in it forever. And so there's also another kata called Code Reading Club. It's not really a kata; it's more of a group analysis of code. And so Code Reading Club, and we'll provide links to this in the comments, but Code Reading Club is great because it's like, here's this large piece of code, like, where are the functions? Just circle them. Where are the parameters? What parameters are being used with those functions? Where do you see that? And you just dig deeper and deeper into understanding the code, because often even the very beginning and starting and reading code is very challenging. So I don't know, that that was all over the place, but this is,
Oh, I like these. Yeah, I'm gonna look into these if we do this again. An idea I had for years was to give students an assignment where you give them some already existing large chunk of code, and they have to either fix a bug or add a feature that sounds really easy, and then when they actually get into it, you realize the code is terrible, and then you ask them when they're finished the assignment, so what did you hate about this? 'Cause I figure that's a lot of how you learn. And well, I didn't do it though. Even though a year earlier, I was thinking, God, I want to try to get get do it this way or have one assignment like this. So I couldn't really I failed to find a good code base to use for that purpose and didn't have the time to you know uh, you know contrive one up.
Ah.
Uh, so it sounds like though that there are that I probably could find some.
Yeah.
You know what? Here's an experiment, wild experiment. Especially given the current state of AI, it just kind of mimics industry code. You could probably ask AI to make this, because even if you don't tell it to make it bad, it'll probably make it bad naturally.
Oh yeah,
But if you told it like make the code work, but also make it difficult to work with, it
Obscure
could
and
probably generate, I don't know. I haven't tried this, but in my mind just fired right now. Like generate, I don't know, a 10,000 line code base, you know what I mean? That has these attributes. And then I wonder if it could do it. Yeah. My suspicion is it'd be quite good at it because sometimes it does that even if you don't ask it to.
oh that's right. Yeah, definitely have to play around with this some more.
Yeah. Yep. Cool, cool, cool. We are getting a little close to time. Maybe one more question. Yes. Yeah, this is something that's interesting to me is yeah, I'm real passionate about mob and class size. And we probably won't have time to dive deep into this. But let's say the marketing department for your next class does a fantastic job. Just assuming, just kidding. But 30 students sign up, for your class or something like that. Um, would the benefits be diffused or lost? What are your serendipity chances there? You know what I mean, or something like that. Yeah, what are your thoughts on a class size larger than the 7 or 8 you had?
Okay, I've been wondering about this for a long time. I don't have any good answers, but I can tell you my partial answers.
Uh-huh.
Um, One is even 7 students was, I think, too big. It
Hmm.
still worked, right? It wasn't a disaster, but it did work well. But um, you spend too students spend too long out of the loop, and we couldn't break up into smaller mobs because we're all trying to figure this out. What are we doing together? Or we're all trying to figure this out together. We weren't in a position where we could say break off a problem and say you guys go solve this. Um, Also, we have the mob size was 8, right? Because I was just in the mob. I that was how I played it. I played it like a tech lead, not a you know teacher running everything. Um, and So I was thinking like, okay, so like with 30 students, like, okay, no way, you're not, it's just you can't get through a complete rotation in one class session. Um, so you could say, all right, let's just have multiple mobs, and maybe I, as the teacher, I'll just sort of, oh, you told me a term last time for this, the navigator who's floating navigator or something like
oh yeah,
that.
the linking navigator from the team in Japan. Yeah, so they would try to listen to both and rotate in when there was pertinent information that both were working on or in that space. But yeah, and you know, there are multiple teams that even I'm working with now. So months ago, I kind of created a new pattern that seems to be getting adopted by different teams. And so what I've been doing is I've been just embedding myself in the mob and answering questions as they work their way through the pattern. So not actively participating in the mob because I have other things that I need to work on, but just being available so that, for questions and steering and things like that. And so that pattern can also work very well.
Okay, interesting. I'm also another difficulty in the class is we really liked having the big screen, for so everyone could see it. You very few classrooms have more than one of those.
Yeah,
You know, so we might have maybe just go down to pairs. Maybe that's good enough. Pairing is just mobbing with two.
yeah.
But anyway, that's another obstacle to doing this class with doing mobbing with a large class. And I'm kind of sad about this because currently I'm not really confident that I could pull this off with a large class.
Well, so I guess that brings up two thoughts. So at different events for pairing, I've done code dojos where everybody pairs up and we work on the same problem together, but it's in different languages every time. But you can do it in any way. You can do different problems in the same language. You can kind of mix it up, but it's kind of a learning activity on collaboration. But you rotate the people, so the driver becomes the navigator goes to a different language as the new driver, and then you start with experts, and then you slowly work your way down into, work your way through everyone, and everybody learns a little bit about each language as you go, or each problem, however you want to play it. Um, and so that works pretty well. And then I would uh, also recommend Joy Inc. By Richard Sheridan, um, and look at Menlo Innovation because their working style is a little bit different. They typically have promiscuous pairing happening, and every day they rotate pairs, and in order to maintain context, and that has worked well for them according to the book and other things. And we've also had him on the show.
Cool, cool. Yeah, any final thoughts, Ben, before we shut down this episode? I know we might have ended with more questions and answers here, but that's a good place to be, to engage, to ask our audience to participate. But yeah, for yourself, do you have anything to share or plug before we close?
Oh, I just want to thank three people who, without whom this course would never happen and would not have been a success. First of all, Professor Shireen Bogle at Cal Poly Humboldt. She is the one who developed the software engineering curriculum. She developed the software design course. This course would not exist without her efforts. Um, Also, Rebecca Werfsbrock, I consulted with her on designing the course beforehand, and she is the one who brought up mobbing very shortly. Just we're getting pretty close before the course started, and I thought, oh, that's a good idea right there. She was, I had kind of dismissed the idea when I first heard about it, and she basically sold me on it enough to start looking into it seriously. And and lastly, a former coworker of mine, Sam Asla Mir, who helped me quite a lot with getting all of the C++ stuff ready to go with he'd actually designed projects for the students to do. Ultimately, we did something else, but the thinking through of those projects worked really well. And one of the students in the course evals even suggested the same project, like maybe that would be better. So, much gratitude to those three, and of course to you for your consulting, and Woody Zool for his helping me out when the course started.
Excellent, excellent. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Ben, for doing this kind of public retrospective. It's a great kind of learning in public series of discussions. And thank you so much for opening up your world to us and sharing it with us. And yeah, and to our audience, please like and subscribe. Please share this episode with someone you would like to enter into this conversation with you. And yeah, what audience, what's your thoughts on how do you take this magical stuff that happened with a smaller group? How do you apply it to a large class of 30? Is it possible? Yes or no? Or yes, here's how you do it, or no, it can't be done, or any of the topics we hit today. We just love to hear your thoughts and opinions. And if you have your own stories of mobbing in a classroom, we'd love to hear it too. But thanks again, Ben, for being on the show. Super fun. And to everyone else, mob on and have a good one. Adios.
Thanks, everybody.